Hi there, students. I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. Why don't we have a check in, Have you been busy lately? In a lot of places around the world, school is starting now. Are you taking other classes? Besides mine, I mean. I have always had this idea with my lessons that I really want them to be accessible to people who don't have a lot of free time. Devoting time to learning a foreign language can be a really intense commitment. My hope is always that my lessons will make that process easier for people, that they will have fun, and that these lessons can be something that you watch each week and learn just a little small bit about the Japanese language. Today's lesson is going to focus a bit more than just on the language, though. I pretty firmly believe that in order to learn Japanese, you really need to understand something about Japanese culture too. So today's lesson will be a vocabulary lesson, but we're also going to chat just a little bit about why I think it's important to understand some of the cultural reasons that Japanese can be so complicated. But the things that make Japanese complicated are kind of also the thing that make Japanese so cool, so I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. Ikimashou! So today I want to introduce to you some honorific titles and family words in Japanese. Honorific language is really important in Japanese, but it can be tricky to navigate. After years and years of studying Japanese and living in Japan, this is something that's really come into focus for me, and I honestly think that it's something that should be taught earlier in Japanese courses. Japanese is a context-driven language. Grammar and meaning are both dependent on your understanding of cultural nuance and cultural context. Most European languages are content languages, meaning you say exactly what it is that you want to say. But Japanese requires a bit more cultural literacy. Japanese specifically is very difficult to learn in isolation. To some degree, you could study Spanish or French or German, and you really don't need to invest a whole lot of time or energy into understanding the cultural nuances that make up the language. Sure, knowing those things can certainly be helpful, but for Japanese, I think it's difficult to have a firm foundation with the language if you're not also working to grasp the cultural context that makes the language function. How you address other people in Japan is really important. So that's where we're going to start today. Japanese uses a system of honorific suffixes that we use to position ourselves relative to other people. Today I'm going to discuss those honorifics in terms of levels, as in who might be in a higher station than you or who might be in a lower station. But I think that actually gives people the wrong idea. Using honorific titles is less about saying that one person is better or more valuable than someone else, and more about humbling yourself and giving other people respect when you talk to them or talk about them. Alright, so this first concept that we're going to start with is name plus san. San is really the most basic honorific title in Japanese, and it often gets translated as Mr. or Mrs. If I was talking to one of my coworkers at Puppy Incorporated, I might call them Shiba-san. First important note about san, though, it is not a gendered term. You can use it for anyone. Male, female, non-binary, doggo, it doesn't matter. San is an all-inclusive title. However, I am going to say that I have a bit of a problem with treating san in the same way that I might use Mr. or Miss in English. I rarely use the titles Mr. or Miss. Like, almost never. I think almost the only time that I would ever call somebody Mr. So-and-so would be if I really didn't know them pretty much at all and I was talking to someone else about them. Or maybe if I was talking to someone that I just have like a whole lot of respect for, like if I met one of my heroes, then yeah, I might call them, Mr. Markiplier. But it's a little different with san, okay? If I'm talking to a Japanese person and I'm addressing them directly, I'm almost always going to use their family name plus san pretty much every time. Sometimes I might use their given name plus san, but I'll always affix san to their name whether I'm speaking to them directly or talking about them to someone else. I've actually heard husbands and wives call one another by their last name plus san. It's pretty much universal. It's used all the time, even within family members sometimes. It's going to be used with almost all names except your own. Something like, "Good morning, Mr. Neighbor," in English, to me sounds weird and folksy and forced. But "Ohayou gozaimasu, Shiba-san" is just expected. I use sentences like that practically every day. This is an important note, though. You would never, ever, ever use san for yourself. I call myself Puppy-Sensei in a bit of a cutesy way, but I would never call myself Puppy-san. That sounds very weird and very wrong, and it kind of goes against the whole reason that we use titles in the first place. San doesn't have any level distinction. In other words, it's flat. You can use it with anybody who is on your level. All right, the next honorific that we're going to learn is sama, just like manager-sama. Sama is more respectful than san, and you can use it when you really want to draw a distinction between yourself and the other person. I call manager-sama that in a bit of a playful way, but it's not entirely accurate. So, who do you use sama for? Would you use sama for your boss? Well, maybe, but not necessarily. It kind of depends on how close you are. Sama can put a bit of distance between you and the person that you're trying to show respect to, and sometimes it does that in a way that makes them feel bad. I've actually addressed people as sama in the past, and it's actually hurt them a little bit. They've felt like, oh, I thought we were closer than this. There's really almost no English equivalent that even comes close with sama. Sama is used for someone who is on a whole other level from you. And so, me, personally, I don't usually use sama for my boss, but I might use it for my boss's boss. Sama is also not a gendered term, so you can use it for men, women. Although, you might hear the term "Goshujin-sama" at a maid cafe, and that's technically a masculine-leaning term. Although I have heard it used for women. Not that I know anything about maid cafes. There's actually another non-gendered honorific suffix that also elevates the person that you're addressing in a way that's similar to sama, but maybe not quite as extreme, and that's dono. Dono shows the same level of respect to the person while humbling yourself, but as I said, it's less extreme. I've heard it translated actually as "my lord," and I guess you and I can both maybe come up with some creative environments where you might want to use something like "my lord" or "dono," but what if you're not in one of those environments? Would you ever use "dono" to refer to someone in real life? Well, yes, actually. I frequently use "dono" when I'm writing to someone in a position of authority who works for a different company that's not the company that I work for. As an example, if Puppy Incorporated was buying something from an outside company, let's call that company, sure, Kitten Co. Cute. Well, then I would refer to that company and maybe its representatives as Kitten Dono. Manager-sama, was this just a weird way to get me to say Lord Kitten? Anyway, the next set of terms that I'm going to teach you will be senpai and kohai. Do you already know what they mean? Here's the thing about senpai and kohai. So far, we've learned san, sama, and dono today, and those are suffixes. They aren't nouns, and they can't be used on their own. Like, I would never say, "I was talking to a sama," and blah blah blah. That's not the case with senpai and kohai. Those are nouns, but they can also be used as suffixes. Senpai is someone who came before you, particularly in a school or a work setting. Your senpai is your upperclassman, anyone who has 1 or more years ahead of you. And likewise at work, anyone who was hired into the same job position as you, but earlier than you, is also your senpai. Someone who's really at the same level as you, but maybe a few steps before you. By the way, do you hear me saying senpai and it kind of sounds like an M, even though we know that that's an N sound? That's just kind of a typical sound change that happens when you have the N sound right before a P sound. Anyway, the opposite of senpai is your kohai. Kohai is someone who comes after you. Your kohai at school is anyone who is your underclassman that's under you. Again, these words can be used as titles, as in Puppy-Senpai or Puppy-Kohai. There he is. But they could also be used as nouns, like Puppy is my kohai. Puppy wa watashi no kohai desu. Or Puppy is my senpai. Puppy wa watashi no senpai desu. There's also sensei, and that tends to be used for teachers and doctors. Technically, sensei is not the word for teacher. That word might be kyoshi. Sensei is used as an honorific for people in teaching positions or people who have had a lot of education, and it technically means one who came before you. In Japanese, there are also two pretty common diminutive honorific suffixes, and you're likely to see them pretty often. We'll start with kun. Kun is a suffix, not a noun like senpai, kohai, or sensei. It's a bit masculine leaning. It's usually used for boys, but it can also be used for girls who are a bit sporty or hot. Uh, boyish is the word that I meant to say. Anyway, I think kun is actually a pretty cool suffix, and a lot of younger Japanese people use it for one another. I think it carries the same meaning as like fam or bro. Next is chan. Chan is a diminutive suffix that tends to convey an atmosphere of smallness and cuteness. When used for children, it can more or less be used universally between genders, and it might be best translated as little one. Chan is, however, a somewhat gendered term, especially after the age of about 10 or so. After that point, it does become a very heavily female-leaning term. I frequently hear Japanese moms refer to their really young sons by given name Chan, but once those sons become teens, I feel like those teen boys would like really feel like it was cringe to be called Chan. I don't think I would hear that anymore at that point. But for girls, Chan might actually be used within the family even into adulthood. I've even personally used it to refer to like sweet old ladies, like Oba-chan for a cute older grandma. Even if it's not your grandma, like a sweet old lady can be an Oba-chan. Speaking of Oba-chan, we should really talk about the words for family members in Japanese. This word is Kazoku. It means family. So for the rest of today's lesson, we'll be learning family member vocab. Let's start with your parents. The word for both your parents in Japanese is ryoshin. That shin can also be pronounced oya, which just means parent. I really like the word oya because it reminds me of a Japanese dish called oyakodon. Oyakodon is a bowl, a don, filled with both chicken and egg, and rice and other stuff. But oya means parent, and ko means child. So since oyakodon is made up of both chicken and egg, it's literally the bowl that's filled with both the parent and the child. Eat an entire family in one sitting. Nom nom. Your dad is your chichi. Please calm down back there. I know it sounds funny. Chichi specifically refers to your own dad. You really wouldn't use chichi for someone else's dad. But if you wanted to talk about someone else's dad, or about your own dad respectfully, you would use otou-san. That o is an honorific prefix, and it gives respect to other people, or other people's families, or sometimes honorable objects. Likewise, your mom is your haha. By the way, that kanji is boobs. Look it up. It's boobs. Just like with your dad, you wouldn't call someone else's mom haha. Instead, you would use oka-san for that. And you can also use that for your own mom, respectfully. By the way, a lot of Japanese kids these days will use papa and mama, like mommy and daddy, especially if they're very young. And I actually think that's so stinking cute. Kind of adorable. All right, let's talk siblings now. In Japanese, you specify whether your sibling is older than you or younger than you. And therefore, your older brother is your ani or your ni-san. Someone else's older brother would be their oni-san. Your younger brother is your ototo. Your older sister is your ane or your ne-san. And someone else's sister, yep, you guessed it, one-san. And your little sister is your imoto. I said it before, but your grandmother is your oba-san. Or oba-chan if she's nasty. Or, I mean, if she's a sweet old lady. And your grandfather would be your oji-san. Let's go ahead and throw aunt and uncle into the mix. Your aunt would be your oba-san, and your uncle would be your oji-san. Yep, gotta be careful with those Japanese vowels. Grandmother, oba-san. Aunt, oba-san. Grandfather, oji-san. Uncle, oji-san. All right, we're almost through here. There are just a few more family words that I want to teach you before our quiz today. Otto means your own husband. Want to know something cool? Have you learned the word anata in your Japanese classes and then been told that you're never allowed to use it? A lot of Japanese classes will teach you the word anata as the second person pronoun you, but in practice, I almost never ever hear anata, with one exception. Sometimes Japanese wives will use anata when talking to their husbands. Sometimes I hear it in kind of like a little bit of like a cutting way, like a little sassy, like, anata. Somebody else's husband would be their goshujin, just like my maid cafe example above that we're never ever going to mention ever again, please. Your wife would be your tsuma, and somebody else's wife would be their okusan, which is literally the one at your house. Finally, let's look at children. Whoa, yikes, don't clip that. Anyway, the word for child in Japanese is kodomo, or sometimes just ko, like in my oyakodon example above. Your son would be your musuko, and someone else's son would be their musuko-san. Your daughter would be your musume, and also musume can be used to refer to like a young woman or a young lady or a group of pop stars. Someone else's daughter is their ojo-san. And that's it. So why don't we test your knowledge with a quiz, okay? All right, the format of today's quiz is going to be quite a lot different than what we've done before. But be sure to stick around until the end of the quiz because I actually have a bit of a bonus mini lesson thrown in here too. This is Puppy Kohai. Say hi to Puppy Kohai, everyone. For the first part of this quiz, I want you to use the appropriate title for Puppy Kohai based on your respective social levels. Here is the first one. So, in this case, you and Puppy Kohai are on the same level. So how would you refer to him? And keep in mind that we're going to toss out the Kohai part of Puppy Kohai here. So you're going to call him just Puppy blank, Puppy title, right? So what's the best and most even suffix that you can use for puppy in this case? That'd be puppy-san. So anytime you're talking about or talking to someone who's effectively on the same level as you in Japanese, then you're almost always going to use their name plus san to refer to that person. All right, well, what if Puppy Kohai were on a higher social level than you? What if Puppy Kohai happened to be the general manager of the company that you work for? How would you address him then? Puppy-sama is the best answer in this case. Of course, you might have said puppy dono, and that's not exactly terribly wrong, Dono is a bit complicated. Earlier in this lesson, I taught you that dono could be translated as my lord, but in practice, it's a bit weird. You're really going to use dono most frequently in cases where the person that you're addressing works at a different company, not the same company as you. So in this case, it's not the best answer because I said that Puppy Kohai is the general manager of your company. Okay, so for this next one, you're going to use a diminutive suffix for Puppy Kohai. I've created the context for this as though you're looking down on Puppy Kohai, but that's not exactly right, and I want to make absolutely sure that I illustrate this point. Japanese is a language that's designed to elevate others while humbling yourself, but it is absolutely not a language that is designed to put others down. That means that someone who is in a position above you, such that you would definitely refer to them as sama, just because they're in that position does not mean that they would refer to you as kun or chan. Not unless you're adorable, anyway. More than likely, they're still going to refer to you as san, even as you're referring to them as sama. Anyway. In this case, Puppy Kohai wants to be called a diminutive suffix. We've learned two, but Puppy Kohai is feeling particularly cute, so let's use the suffix that's a bit more kitty or girly. It should be puppy-chan. Oh, also, if you're talking to a little one, like a baby, you can even use tan, like T-A-N for maximum cuteness. Okay, for this next part of the quiz, we're going to do something different. I'm going to give you a family chart, and I want you to identify the members of your immediate family. So let's start here. This is your mom. How would we say that in Japanese? We would say haha, or oka-san, or even ka-chan. I hear ka-chan a lot from daughters who want something from their moms. Ka-chan, okashi tabete mo ii desu ka? Mom, can I have a snack? How about this one? This is your sister. She's older than you. So what would this be in Japanese? It would be ne-san or ane. The same rules apply to chan too. I've frequently used ne-chan in some cases. Okay, next. This is your dad. How do you say dad in Japanese? Chichi. Why does everyone always laugh when I say that? You can also say otou-san or tou-san. I'm sure some people might use otou-chan, but I've never actually heard it before. At a glance, I'm seeing around like 20 or something instances of otou-chan in a large language set, compared to about 6,000 uses of otou-san. So that gives you an idea of how rare it would be. Okay, well, how about your younger sister? And you can definitely use chan with this word. What is it? Imoto. Very good. Okay, the next two are your brothers. This is your older brother. Do you recall how you would say it? It would be ani or ni-san. By the way, I've heard both ani and ani, both with the long e sound and without. I believe both are acceptable. Okay, how about younger brother? Do you recall how to say it? Ototo. Okay, is that everyone? Ah, you want to know how to say yourself? Well, let's look at some words for I in Japanese. We've already talked about watashi. Watashi is the most basic Japanese form for the personal pronoun. Okay? In written form, it's pretty standard, and it's a relatively generic word for I. But in spoken Japanese, I think watashi sounds just a little bit feminine. Just a little. It's formal, so it really is what you should be using in most cases. However, You might also want to use boku. Boku is just slightly masculine, although I do really hear frequently hot girls, I mean sporty, boyish girls, using it quite often. I actually think boku is kind of becoming the new standard in Japan. More and more I hear women using it. Although I don't, because I don't know, for some reason I feel like my Japanese is particularly feminine. I don't know. Anyway, there's also ore. And ore is strongly masculine. Like, it's so mask that I would never use it under any circumstances. I do hear lesbians use it sometimes, but it's also extremely informal. So don't use it, male or female, with people that you might be in any way, shape, or form afraid of offending. Okay, mini lesson over. All right, everyone, that's all for this week. Next week, we're going to do another test. That's really for your benefit, just to give you a reason to practice. As I've said before, failing is the best way to learn, so please feel free to fail my test. I won't judge you. ぜひ試験を試してみてお願いします. Oh, also, please do all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, comment, react. That really helps out my channel, and it makes it so that I can keep doing these videos. Lead with love, everybody. I've been XS. See you later. Mata ne!